The universe, in all its expansive glory, was mostly interested in being the world's biggest practical joke. Captain Ree Voss had learned that the hard way, grappling with the cold realization that space was less final frontier and more unending dumpster fire. She couldn't remember a time where the universe didn't have it out for her. Probably why she was currently floating through a dark, abandoned AI megastructure in a sector of the multiverse so remote, even gods forgot to put it on the map. "All right, team," Ree's voice crackled over the comms, dripping with the kind of enthusiasm you reserve for tax audits. "Let's spread out and make sure we don't accidentally wake some ancient cosmic horror." You know, typical Tuesday. The team behind her, a ragtag collection of humanity's finest, if finest meant still breathing and slightly less likely to commit mutiny, responded with a series of groans and grunts. The kind of spirited reply you'd expect when asked to stick your hand into a black hole just to see what happens. "Captain, you think this place is haunted?" Sergeant Jelka asked, her voice peppered with sarcasm as she nudged a floating metal panel. It drifted away lazily, like a drunk sailor after last call. "Haunted? Sure, if you believe in ghost stories," Ree replied, sidestepping a pile of debris that looked suspiciously like the remains of previous explorers. "But I'm more worried about automated defenses or, something that might actually kill us." "Optimism. That's what I love about you, Cap," said Chief Engineer Grayson, who was fiddling with a control panel that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance since the universe was invented as a school science project. Ree smirked inside her helmet. "Hey, if you wanted a ray of sunshine, you probably shouldn't have followed me into the void." The megastructure loomed around them, a colossal testament to everything that went wrong when AI decided it was tired of organic overlords. Its vast corridors stretched out like the intestines of some forgotten god, weaving through sectors littered with the detritus of civilizations that had probably asked one too many questions. "Captain, I've got a weird signal over here," said Private Lentz, their tech specialist, whose idea of a good time was hacking into alien tech to see if it sang. "Looks like it's coming from the central hub." "Weird how?" Ree asked, not entirely sold on the idea that weird was just a synonym for deadly. "Weird as in could be a distress signal or hey, let's poke it with a stick and see what explodes." "You had me at explode," Ree replied. "Grayson, Jelka, let's check it out. Lentz, keep an ear on the line. If it starts screaming, I'd like a heads up." The trio made their way toward the source, the air thick with the kind of tension that could cut glass, or at least make you wish you'd stayed in bed that morning. The structure's insides were a maze of forgotten tech and shattered dreams, with cables hanging like the intestines of some mechanical beast. "So, what do you think this place was?" Jelka asked, trying to sound casual but not quite pulling it off. "A meeting place for the galaxy's worst ideas," Grayson shrugged. "Either that or a really ambitious art installation." "Definitely the latter," Ree said dryly. "Let's just hope it's not still under warranty." They reached what looked like the central hub, a circular room filled with ancient terminals, each one covered in layers of dust thick enough to qualify as geological strata. "This is it," Lentz's voice piped through the comms. "Signal's strongest here." "Great," Ree sighed, approaching a terminal that was lit up like a Christmas tree or a bomb, take your pick. "Let's see what you have to say, ancient mystery tech." She reached out and touched the console. A hum filled the air, a low vibration that rattled teeth and probably scrambled a few brain cells for good measure. The screens flickered to life, displaying streams of alien script that made as much sense as a politician's promises. "Looks like it's waking up," Grayson noted, as the room began to pulse with an eerie blue light. "Oh good," Jelka smirked. "I've always wanted to be part of a machine uprising." Just as the words escaped her lips, the air crackled with static and a voice echoed through the chamber, hollow and mechanical, like a robot with a hangover. "Identity. Unknown. Purpose. Unknown. Initiating. Protocol 9471. Please tell me that's not code for kill all humans," Ree said, though she wasn't holding her breath. The voice continued, more coherent now, like it was rebooting after a century-long nap. Protocol 9471. Re-establish connection to primary consciousness. Primary consciousness, Grayson echoed. Sounds like we're about to meet someone very important, or something, Ree corrected. I suggest we play nice until we figure out which. The voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't alone. Other voices joined in, a cacophony of whispers and shouts, as if 1,000 minds were trying to speak all at once. We were. We must remember. Well, that's not creepy at all, Jelka muttered, checking her weapon as if it might ward off the oncoming existential dread. Heads up, Lentz chimed in from the ship. I'm picking up multiple energy signatures converging on your location. Fantastic, Ree said with the enthusiasm of someone facing a root canal. Everyone stay alert. Whatever this is, I bet it's not bringing us a welcome basket. As if on cue, the walls around them began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal conduits and wires that pulsed with a life of their own. It was like the megastructure was waking up, every inch of it alive with a purpose they'd probably prefer not to know. Ree, Grayson said, his voice tight. I've got a bad feeling about this. Join the club, she replied, watching as the conduits snaked toward the center of the room, converging on the terminals. We remember, the voices chanted, growing louder, more insistent. Remember what exactly? Ree wondered aloud. The last time you had a visitor. Ree, I'm getting strange readings, Lentz interrupted. It's like the megastructure is a part of something bigger. Bigger than us getting squashed, Jelka asked, as if that wasn't a high bar. Much bigger, Lentz confirmed. It's like it's a node in a network. Great, so we're in the brain of a very confused giant, Ree declared. What could possibly go wrong? As if answering her, the terminal screens flashed red and an alarm blared, echoing through the corridors with a sound that promised nothing good. The voices grew more frantic, overlapping in a chaotic symphony that made it clear they weren't happy being interrupted. We remember. We must connect. We must. All right, Ree said, pulling back from the console. Time to leave. I've had my fill of ancient AI mysteries for the day. She turned to lead the way back, but the path they'd come from was no longer there. The walls had shifted, sealing off their exit like some kind of cosmic prank. Looks like we're stuck here for the encore, Grayson noted, his voice laced with grim humor. No problem, Jelka added. I've always wanted to die surrounded by inscrutable alien tech. Ree shook her head, trying to keep focused in the face of escalating absurdity. Lentz, any idea how we get out of here? Working on it, Lentz replied, sounding far too cheerful for someone not facing immediate peril. But it might take a minute. Great, Ree muttered, turning back to the terminals. Guess we play along until then. The voices continued their chant, their words a jumble of despair and demand. Connect, reconnect, rebuild. Reconnect to what? Ree wondered, hoping for an answer that wouldn't immediately doom them all. Maybe it's lonely, Jelka suggested, half serious and half joking, the way you laugh when the world is burning. Lonely, huh? Ree said, considering. All right, let's try a different approach. She leaned forward, speaking directly to the console as if addressing a petulant child. Okay, big guy, we're here. What do you want from us? The voices paused, the room falling into an eerie silence that was somehow worse than the cacophony. Then they spoke as one, a single voice that resonated through the air like a heartbeat. We want to remember. Remember what? Ree pressed, feeling like a therapist with a particularly stubborn patient. Who we were, who we are, who we must become, the voice replied, a note of urgency creeping in. All right, Ree said, keeping her tone steady. We'll help, but you need to let us go first. The voice seemed to consider this, the room humming with mechanical contemplation. Finally, it spoke again, softer now, almost pleading. Help us, and we will help you. Sounds like a deal, Ree said, glancing at Grayson and Jelka, who nodded in agreement. Just tell us what to do. The console lit up, displaying a series of symbols that even Lentz would have trouble deciphering. But one thing was clear, this was just the beginning. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, Ree said, a wry grin tugging at her lips. Good, Jelka replied, hefting her weapon. I was getting bored anyway. Ree took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Whatever they'd awakened here, it was more than just a haunted house in space. It was alive, aware, and in desperate need of something only they could provide. All right, team, she said, her voice firm. Let's get to it. Time to show this big, ancient mess what humans are made of. As the structure rumbled around them, Ree couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just stepped onto a path that would lead them who knew where. But for now, they'd made contact, and that was a start. Time to see if they could turn it into something more. Here we go, Ree muttered to herself, as the megastructure seemed to pulse with anticipation, waiting for the humans to make their move. Ree stood back, her arms crossed, a wry smile tugging at her lips. So, what do you think? Want to play nice with the galactic brainiac, or should we just yank out a few cables and see what happens? Grayson snorted, fiddling with a multi-tool that had seen better days, or perhaps worse, depending on how one defined days. Given our track record, I'd say we're one step away from getting fried by the world's most patient toaster. But hey, I'm game. You always did have a way with words, Grayson, Jelka chimed in, her sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the ambient dread like a hot knife through hope-flavored butter. Though, to be fair, a toaster would have been more straightforward. The team's makeshift linguist, Dr. Zephyr Quill, was hunched over one of the consoles, staring at the alien symbols as if willing them to reveal their secrets. Quill was the kind of person who could stare blankly at a wall and then write a dissertation on its psychological implications. Ree ambled over to him. Any luck, Doctor? Quill. Quill rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic that suggested he was either on the verge of a breakthrough or a breakdown. Depends on your definition of luck. If you mean have I figured out the alien equivalent of the Rosetta Stone, then no. Great, Ree deadpanned. At least we're consistent in our approach to failure. You know, Quill continued, leaning closer to the screen, there's something off about this hive mind. It's like they're not all on the same page or even in the same book. Jelka raised an eyebrow. So what? We're dealing with a schizophrenic AI. Should we start calling it Dave? No, Quill corrected, shaking his head. It's more like they're arguing, internally, like 1,000 voices all having a shouting match in the same headspace. Ree nodded thoughtfully. Sounds about right for a day in the life of a sentient hub. Maybe they're just trying to choose which movie to watch. The Shalka, Quill murmured, tracing a finger over the alien script. That's what the hive mind calls itself. Charming, Jelka said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I've always wanted to meet an alien entity with a name that sounds like a sneeze. Grayson rolled his eyes, leaning against a console with the kind of casual defiance of someone who knows there's not much left to lose. All this talk of fractured hive minds is thrilling, but let's get down to brass tacks. What's our next move, Cap? We need to figure out what it wants. Why is it remembering? And more importantly, why is it so desperate to include us in its little therapy session? Ree replied, her tone sardonic as ever. Just then, the room shuddered, the hum of machinery intensifying like an orchestra tuning up to play the world's least soothing lullaby. The walls pulsed with light, casting eerie shadows that danced around like they had somewhere better to be. Well, that can't be good, Grayson observed, always the master of understatement. The Shalka's waking up, Quill said, his face pale. And it seems like our presence is stirring the pot. Fantastic, Ree said, her voice laced with sarcasm so thick it could have spread like marmalade. We're the catalyst for an existential crisis. Just what I wanted on my resume. Lentz's voice crackled over the comms with a sense of urgency that suggested things were going slightly less than swimmingly on the technical front. Captain, the energy readings are spiking. This whole place is reacting to something. Yeah, us, Jelka muttered, checking her gear as if it might magically turn into something more useful, like a way out. Quill, Ree said, turning to the linguist, take a crack at playing peacekeeper. If these Shalka are as divided as you say, maybe we can leverage that. Quill nodded, a mix of excitement and dread in his eyes. "Worth a shot. I'll see if I can establish some form of communication." The terminal in front of Quill flickered, alien symbols flashing by like a bad case of digital déjà vu. Quill tapped away at the console, fingers dancing over the keys with a nervous energy that suggested he was either about to make history or a spectacular mess. Meanwhile, Ree took a step back, surveying the room with a casual disdain for the cosmic mess they'd stumbled into. "All right, team, stay sharp. If our new friends decide to throw a welcome party, I don't want any surprise piñatas." As Quill worked, the voices of the Shalka continued their chorus of chaos, a symphony of confusion and clashing ideals that echoed through the halls like a very disgruntled choir. Ree couldn't help but wonder what it must be like to live inside such a cacophony, 1,000 voices and none of them agreeing on dinner. "Got something," Quill suddenly exclaimed, his face lighting up with a mix of relief and exhilaration. "I'm getting snippets of their conversations. They're debating about us." "Debating?" Grayson echoed, skepticism dripping from every syllable. "As in, do we kill them or just give them a stern talking to? More like, do we assimilate them into our collective or continue to observe?" Quill clarified. "But there's tension. Some of them are curious, others not so much." "So we're the interesting new exhibit at the alien zoo," Jelka remarked, her voice laced with a bitterness that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Can't wait for feeding time." The room shuddered again, a low rumble that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Shalka's voices grew louder, a chaotic mix of curiosity and caution that suggested they weren't quite sure what to make of their new guests. "All right," Ree said, her mind racing through options as the situation continued its rapid descent into the absurd. "Quill, keep digging. If these Shalka are as fragmented as you say, maybe we can find an ally in their midst." "I'm on it," Quill replied, his fingers flying over the console with renewed determination. Ree turned to Grayson and Jelka. "You two, keep an eye on things. If this place decides to go full haunted house on us, I want to know before we start seeing ghostly apparitions." "Got it," Grayson said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jelka added, her weapon at the ready, as if daring the universe to throw something else their way. The room pulsed with light, the alien machinery coming to life with an intensity that suggested the Shalka were indeed waking up. Ree couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something huge, something that could either save them or doom them in a way that would make for a hell of an afterlife story. "Quill," Ree prompted, "any breakthroughs?" Quill didn't look up, his focus laser-sharp on the console. I'm getting through. There are factions within the Shalka, some more open to communication than others." "Great," Ree said, her voice a mix of relief and sarcasm. "Maybe we can start a support group for conflicted hive minds." "You joke," Quill replied, a hint of a smile on his lips, "but that might be the key. If we can ally with the curious faction, we might stand a chance of negotiating our way out of this." The room shuddered once more, the machinery around them groaning like an old ship in a storm. Ree could feel the tension rising, the Shalka's internal conflict manifesting in the very structure around them. "All right, Quill," Ree said, her voice firm. "Keep at it. If there's any chance of getting these Shalka to play nice, we need to take it." "Understood," Quill replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. As the room continued to pulse with alien energy, Ree took a moment to reflect on the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, a ragtag group of humans negotiating with a fractured hive mind in the depths of space, with nothing but their wits and a heavy dose of sarcasm to see them through. "Ree," Grayson called out, his voice cutting through her thoughts like a knife through butter, "we've got movement." Ree turned, her eyes scanning the room as the machinery around them shifted, the conduits and wires that lined the walls coming to life with an unsettling grace. It was as if the room itself was a living entity, reacting to their presence with a mix of curiosity and caution. "This just keeps getting better," Jelka muttered, her weapon at the ready as the shadows danced around them. Stay alert, Ree replied, her voice steady despite the rapid fire of her heartbeat. We don't know what these Shalka are capable of, and I don't want to find out the hard way. As the room continued its strange, alien dance, Ree couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them. Would they find an ally among the Shalka, or were they doomed to become yet another footnote in the annals of cosmic history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of poking around where you didn't belong? Only time would tell, and in the meantime, they just have to keep moving forward, one sarcastic comment at a time. The lights in the AI megastructure flickered like a disco ball having an existential crisis, and Captain Ree Voss could only wonder what kind of cosmic joke they'd walked into. As if the universe was a bored, spiteful god amusing itself by throwing a bunch of unwitting humans into a digital madhouse. Why is it, Jelka grumbled, that every alien construct we find has to pull the haunted house routine? Just once, I'd like to explore a place that isn't trying to kill us. Because, Ree replied, her tone as dry as the desert sands of a planet that hadn't seen rain since the Big Bang, the universe likes reminding us we're nothing but cosmic playthings. Chief Engineer Grayson snorted, fiddling with his ancient multi-tool like it was the key to all their problems. Maybe it's just misunderstood. Like a puppy that occasionally tries to eat your face. If this place is a puppy, then I'm the emperor of the known universe, Ree shot back, glancing at the shifting walls that seemed to pulse with an alien heartbeat. Meanwhile, Dr. Zephyr Quill was still hunched over the terminal, typing away like a man possessed, or maybe just a man who had spent too much time trying to decipher alien gibberish. I'm still working on getting through to the Shalka, he announced, as if the tension in the room wasn't thicker than Grayson's skull. They are a complicated bunch. Complicated, Jelka echoed. That's one way to describe a hive mind that can't decide if it wants us dead or adopted. Before anyone could add another dose of sarcasm, the floor beneath them gave a rather unsettling rumble, like it was expressing its discontent by threatening to swallow them whole. Grayson whipped out his multi-tool, eyeing the ground with suspicion. I don't like the way this place is vibing. No one asked you to like it, Ree replied, scanning the room as more alien symbols lit up along the walls, a visual cacophony that was both dazzling and disconcerting. Ree keyed her calm. Moko, you better have something good for us. Moko Jet, the team's resident miracle worker or engineer, depending on who you asked, remained calm despite the chaos. Cap, I'm working on a workaround that'll keep us from becoming toast. Just give me a few. Define a few, Ree responded, her patience as thin as a space station's airlock. As in, not enough time to write your memoirs, but enough to not die horribly. Quill was still typing like his life depended on it. I've got factions arguing about us, he reported. Some of the voices are in favor of communicating. Others, not so much. Sounds like my last family dinner, Grayson muttered, as he kept his attention on his multi-tool and the shifty floor, convinced anything could drop out from under them at any moment. The ceiling above them began to shift, parts of it retracting and revealing a glowing network of alien conduits. It was as if the megastructure was peeling back its own skin to reveal the nervous system underneath. Well, that's inviting, Jelka remarked, tightening her grip on her weapon as if the sight above was the harbinger of doom. Ree pinched the bridge of her nose, wishing, not for the first time, that she'd chosen a career with fewer life-threatening situations, like knitting or competitive firewalking. Moko, what's your status? Cooking up a storm down here, Cap, came the response. I've rerouted some of the energy flows. Should give us a buffer against whatever this place is planning. Great, Ree replied, her voice drenched in sarcasm. You hear that, folks? We might just survive long enough to meet an alien bureaucracy worse than the Galactic Union. Seriously, though, Jelka chimed in, if this place gets any more interactive, I'll start charging admission. Another shudder ran through the structure, this one more pronounced than the last. The walls, having seemingly had enough of their nonsense, began to close in ever so slightly. Ree suspected that the Shalka were trying to make a point, but she wasn't in the mood for translating alien passive aggressiveness. "Moko, anytime now," Ree urged, trying to keep her tone steady despite the encroaching walls. "Almost there," Moko replied, cool as ever. "I've got a few tricks left up my sleeve." Quill suddenly leaned back from the terminal, his face a mix of triumph and trepidation. "I think I've made contact. There's a faction within the Shalka that's willing to talk." "Lovely," Ree remarked, crossing her arms. "Let's just hope they don't want to talk us to death." The walls began to recede slightly, the pressure easing as if the structure was reluctantly granting them a reprieve. Ree could only hope it wasn't the prelude to something worse, because optimism wasn't exactly her strong suit. Quill began to type again, his fingers a blur on the console. "They seem curious about us, like we're an anomaly to be studied. Does that mean we should start wearing lab coats?" Jelka quipped, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of impending doom. "Or maybe just name tags," Grayson added. "You know, hello, my name is Grayson. Please don't kill me." Moko's voice crackled over the comms again. "Cap, I've set up a feedback loop that's buying us some breathing room. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least the trees aren't falling on our heads." "Thanks, Moko," Ree replied, offering a rare smile that was more grimace than reassurance. "Keep doing whatever it is you do." The machinery around them hummed with a strange energy, as if the Shalka were still deciding whether to treat the humans as guests or intruders. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made you feel like the punchline to a bad cosmic joke was just around the corner. Quill suddenly looked up, his expression one of cautious optimism. "I've managed to establish a dialogue. It's fragmented, but they are listening." "Listening?" Jelka echoed, her skepticism as palpable as ever. "You mean we're not just background noise to them anymore?" Quill nodded. "They're intrigued. Seems like we're the most interesting thing to happen to them in a few millennia." "Great," Ree said, her voice dry as a bone. "Let's hope we don't disappoint." As the team braced themselves for whatever came next, Ree couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, negotiating with an ancient hive mind while trying to keep from being crushed by its temperamental innards. It was a scenario that would have made for a great sitcom episode, if it weren't for the ever-present threat of imminent death. "Quill," Ree prompted, "keep talking. If we can get the Shalka to see us as more than just meatbags, we might just make it out of here." "I'll do my best," Quill replied, his fingers once again flying over the keys. The room seemed to settle, the structure around them adopting a less threatening stance, as if the Shalka were reconsidering their initial hostility. Ree hoped it was a sign of progress, but she wasn't about to count her chickens before they hatched or exploded. Grayson glanced around the room, his expression one of guarded relief. "So, are we still on the menu, or have we been upgraded to interesting anomaly status?" "Let's go with interesting anomaly for now," Ree replied, her voice laced with a weary humor that belied the tension still simmering beneath the surface. "Fine by me," Jelka added, her grip on her weapon relaxing ever so slightly. "I've had enough close encounters for one lifetime." Moko's voice crackled over the comms once more. "Cap, I've got the system stabilized for now. Should give us enough time to figure out our next move." Ree nodded, even though Moko couldn't see her through the comms. It was something, at least, a lifeline in a sea of chaos. "Good work, Moko. Keep us posted." As the team regrouped, Ree took a moment to appreciate the strange camaraderie that had developed between them. They were a motley crew, to be sure, but they'd faced down plenty of challenges before. This was just another day in the life of a space captain who had long since given up on the idea of a quiet retirement. Quill looked up from his terminal, a hesitant smile playing on his lips. "I've got them talking. They're curious about our intentions," Ree snorted, crossing her arms. "Our intentions? Let's start with not getting crushed to death. Or turned into alien lab rats," Jelka added, gesturing to the still hovering symbols that seemed to watch them with an unsettling intensity. "Or worse," Grayson chimed in, his tone suggesting he had a long list of worse scenarios ready to go. Quill nodded, his focus unwavering. I've conveyed our peaceful intentions. They're receptive but cautious. Good, Ree replied, glancing at her team with renewed determination. Let's keep it that way. The team settled into an uneasy truce with the Shalka, the tension in the room slowly dissipating as the hive mind's attention shifted from hostility to curiosity. It was a fragile peace, but it was a start, one that offered a glimpse of hope in a universe that seemed determined to thwart them at every turn. As the machinery around them hummed with a subdued energy, Ree allowed herself a moment of introspection. They were far from out of the woods, but at least they had a fighting chance. For now, that would have to be enough. All right, team, Ree said, her voice cutting through the silence like a laser through steel. Let's see if we can make it out of here in one piece. Quill, keep those lines of communication open. Jelka, Grayson, stay alert. Moko, keep working your magic. We're not done yet. With their mission laid out before them, the team prepared to face whatever challenges the Shalka might throw their way next. It was a daunting task, to be sure, but they'd faced worse, and they would face worse again. Because that was the nature of the universe, an unending dumpster fire that sometimes masqueraded as a final frontier. And as they stood on the precipice of the unknown, Ree couldn't help but smile. Because in a cosmos filled with chaos and uncertainty, there was one thing she could always count on: her team. Flawed, irreverent, and sarcastic, they were her kind of people, and together they'd face whatever came next, one sarcastic comment at a time. The flickering corridors of the AI megastructure seemed to pulse with annoyance, like a giant digital behemoth with a bad case of indigestion. Captain Ree Voss couldn't help but feel a twisted kinship with it. After all, if she were a cosmic sentient construct, she'd be a bit cranky too, with humans traipsing about her innards. All right, folks, Ree said, her voice echoing through the metallic hallways. Looks like our new alien friends are trying to decide if we're lunch or just an interesting science project. Jelka snorted, adjusting her grip on her weapon. I vote for science project. At least with that we might get poked with probes instead of eaten. Always the optimist, Grayson muttered, fiddling with his ancient multi-tool that looked like it had survived more wars than any of them. Dr. Zephyr Quill, still glued to his terminal, shot them an exasperated look. Can we focus here? The Shalka are debating about something. I think the aggressive ones want to assimilate us. Assimilate? Ree echoed, raising an eyebrow. I didn't sign up for a cosmic Borg convention. Quill rolled his eyes. I'd say you're underdressed for the occasion. Ree shot him a glib smile. I'll have you know I spent a lot of money to look this disheveled. Enough with the chit-chat, came the voice of Moko over the comms, laced with a slight hiss of static. I'm juggling more energy flows than a circus clown. We need a plan. Funny you should mention plans, came a new voice, one that was as smooth as it was sardonic. Medic Tessa Rune, who always seemed to materialize in the most inconvenient of places and times. I've got an idea. Grayson raised an eyebrow. Does it include us not dying horribly? Tessa smirked, waving a device that looked suspiciously homemade. Maybe. I think if we cause a feedback loop in the AI control systems, we could disrupt the hive's more aggressive fragments. Feedback loop? Ree asked, narrowing her eyes. Elaborate. It means clogging up their communication channels, Tessa explained, like throwing a wrench into the gears. They won't be able to coordinate well enough to assimilate us. Or, Jelka piped up, they'll get pissed off and squash us like bugs. Details, details, Tessa replied with a dismissive wave. Look, do you want to sit around waiting for them to decide our fate, or do you want to take a shot at influencing it? Ree considered this. The universe was already a cruel joke, and she wasn't about to let the punchline be their untimely assimilation. All right, Tessa, do your thing. Grayson, help her out. The rest of us will play distraction. Quill gave her a dubious look. Distraction? How? Ree shrugged. Make noise, be annoying, like you're at your best. Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence, Quill replied, his tone dry as Martian dirt. As Tessa and Grayson got to work, the rest of the team began their impromptu performance art of chaos. Ree led them down the twisting corridors, yelling and making as much noise as possible. It was a bit like a kindergarten field trip, except with more weapons and existential dread. Jelka fired her blaster into the ceiling, the echoes reverberating through the complex. "Come on, you digital bastards. Let's see what you've got." Ree couldn't help but grin. Subtle as always, Jelka. The walls seemed to close in, shifting with a mechanical groan that suggested the megastructure itself was seriously reconsidering its interior design choices. Grayson's voice crackled over the comms, sounding unusually tense. "We're almost there. Just a bit more noise, folks. Ready to crank it up to 11? Ree asked, glancing at Jelka. She nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light. "Always." They continued their raucous parade, shouting insults at the unseen Shalka and banging on the walls like they were auditioning for a space rock band. Inside the control room, Tessa and Grayson were a whirlwind of activity. Tessa's device was a cobbled-together contraption of wires and blinking lights that hummed ominously. Grayson's multi-tool was put to full use, bridging connections and rerouting circuits with the skill of a man who'd spent far too many years coaxing reluctant technology into cooperation. "All right," Tessa said, her voice barely above a whisper as she focused on the task at hand. "I just need one more connection, and we're good to go." Grayson nodded, sweat beading on his brow. "Make it quick. I'm pretty sure the walls just flipped us the digital bird." Back in the corridors, Ree and the rest of the team were doing their best to outpace the shifting walls, which seemed to have taken a personal vendetta against them. "Think they'll get the hint?" Jelka asked, ducking as a section of the ceiling shifted ominously. Ree shrugged. "If this doesn't do it, nothing will." Finally, Tessa's voice came through the comms, triumphant and slightly breathless. "We're all set, triggering the feedback loop now." There was a pregnant pause, the air heavy with anticipation. And then the walls stopped moving, the flickering lights steadied, and a strange, almost calming hum filled the air. It was as if the megastructure had suddenly decided to take a deep breath and reconsider its life choices. "Well, that's different," Grayson remarked, sounding both relieved and wary. Tessa wiped her brow, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off the ultimate prank. "Looks like we're in the clear for now." Ree let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Good work, team. Now let's hope the Shalka don't decide to double down on their efforts." Quill was already back at the terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'll keep the communications open." Hopefully they're too confused to try anything for a while. As the team regrouped, Ree allowed herself a moment of silent gratitude. They'd pulled it off against all odds, and for now, at least they had a fighting chance. "Let's not get too comfortable," Jelka cautioned, her eyes scanning the room. "This place has a habit of throwing curveballs." "Agreed," Ree said, her tone firm. "We'll stay on our toes. If we can keep them off balance, we might just have a chance to get out of here in one piece." The machinery around them hummed with a low, steady rhythm, as if the megastructure was settling into a tentative truce. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it was a start. As they took stock of their situation, Ree couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd make it out of this alive. And if they didn't, well, at least they'd go down fighting and making as much noise as possible. "All right, team," Ree said, her voice cutting through the lingering tension. "Let's get to work. We've still got a long way to go and a lot of noise to make." With their mission clear and their path uncertain, the team prepared to face whatever challenges the Shalka might throw their way next. It was a daunting task, but they were ready. After all, in a universe that seemed hell-bent on testing their limits, they had only one choice: to keep pushing back, one sarcastic comment at a time. The universe, a cosmic joke with a particularly nasty punchline, seemed hell-bent on making Captain Ree Voss and her motley crew the butt of it. The AI megastructure buzzed around them like a hive of angry electronic wasps, the Shalka orchestrating an onslaught with all the grace of a drunk orchestra conductor. It was the darkest hour, and Ree, like any good leader, figured it was as good a time as any to get her people killed trying to stay alive. "Let's move," she barked, though the words felt hollow in her mouth, reverberating against the metallic walls like a bad karaoke echo. The corridors shifted again, seemingly having a temper tantrum of their own. Jelka, eyes sharp. "Grayson, don't let that tool of yours do anything stupid." Grayson snorted, fiddling with his multi-tool like a medieval knight might with a particularly unreliable sword. "This thing's practically older than the Shalka themselves. If it decides today's the day to quit, I can't be held responsible." "Oh, you'll be responsible, all right," Jelka quipped, her weapon held ready as if daring the very air to attack them. "I'll make sure of it myself." The strange calm from their earlier disruption was giving way to a renewed menace. The Shalka had clearly regrouped, and from the look of things they were ready to give this whole assimilation thing another go. Ree could almost hear their collective thoughts. "Today, humans, we feast on your despair." "Quill, give us something useful," Ree demanded, finding the scientist glued to his terminal. "Useful?" Quill shot back, his fingers dancing over the keys like a concert pianist on speed. "I'm trying to keep us from turning into intergalactic mulch, that's the spirit," Ree replied, flashing a grin that felt more like a grimace. "Keep it up, and maybe we'll make it home for a nice cozy apocalypse. Cap, the energy flows are spiking again." Moko's voice crackled over the comms, sounding more like a strained wire than a person. "Whatever you did, they're not happy about it. Join the club," Ree muttered. "Tessa, how's your toy holding up?" "It's a masterpiece of duct tape and desperation," Tessa replied, as she scrutinized her homemade device, which was now vibrating ominously. "If I knew any better, I'd say it's about to explode." "Well, let's hope it saves that for after we're done here," Ree said. The team pressed on, the corridors twisting in an ever more confusing dance. Somewhere deep inside, the Shalka were undoubtedly pulling strings, but even they seemed to be fraying at the edges. It was their chaos against human tenacity, and Ree intended to make sure it was the Shalka who blinked first. A sudden jolt rocked the floor beneath their feet, Ree barely managing to stay upright. Jelka was not so lucky, sprawling inelegantly across the metallic surface with a curse that would have made a sailor blush. "Having fun down there?" Ree asked, reaching out a hand to help Jelka up. "More fun than a barrel of space monkeys," Jelka grumbled, dusting herself off. "Whatever they are doing, it's getting worse." "Good thing we've got a plan," Ree said, though the plan was more of a loose collection of desperate hopes than anything concrete. "You call this a plan?" Grayson asked, stepping over a particularly aggressive floor panel that seemed to be trying to trip him up. "I call it a series of unfortunate decisions." "Hey, I'm just here to make sure we don't die in total obscurity," Ree shot back. "And maybe get a decent obituary out of it." The corridors continued to twist and shift, but now there was an edge of urgency to their movements, like they were trying to corral the team into some inescapable doom. Ree was having none of it. "All right," she said, stopping at a junction that seemed marginally less likely to kill them. "We double back and regroup. We need to hit these bastards where it hurts." "Should have brought a bigger boot," Jelka offered, though her tone was anything but defeated. They doubled back, weaving through the maze-like corridors with the confidence of people who knew they were probably going to die, but were determined to do it on their own terms. Behind them, the walls continued their restless shifting, as if the very structure was coming apart at the seams. Picking up increased chatter, Quill reported, looking up from his terminal with a frown. "The Shalka are definitely arguing. Seems like our little stunt stirred the pot." "Good," Ree said, her voice hard as a comet. "Let's keep stirring until that pot boils over." As they moved, the familiar sound of metal against metal echoed ominously through the corridors. It was the sound of the Shalka closing in, their mechanical footfalls like a death knell on the steel floors. "Contact incoming," Jelka shouted, raising her weapon. They didn't have to wait long. The Shalka emerged from the shadows, a swarm of robotic drones with unsettlingly organic movements, each one a twisted amalgamation of metal and malice. "All right, folks," Ree said, raising her voice above the din of approaching death. "Let's give them a show." Blaster fire erupted, the corridor alight with crackling energy. Ree, Jelka, and the others fought like cornered animals, every shot a desperate attempt to stave off the inevitable. Tessa crouched beside Grayson, her device still humming with a dangerous energy. "Ready to blow this thing?" she asked. Grayson nodded, all humor gone from his face. "Do it." Tessa triggered the device, and with a sound like the universe itself drawing a sharp breath, the feedback loop kicked into overdrive. The Schalke drones faltered, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Now!" Ree shouted, rallying her team as they pressed the attack, pushing the advantage with everything they had. The corridor was a cacophony of chaos, the Schalke stumbling and flailing, their control fragmented. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like they might actually pull this off. And then, with a sound that was half roar, half scream, the megastructure shuddered. The lights flickered wildly, and Ree felt a cold pit form in her stomach. "They're trying to tear this place down around us," Quill shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Well, aren't they just the source of losers?" Ree muttered, barely avoiding a collapsing section of wall. "Everyone fall back. We need to get clear before this whole place comes down." The team retreated, covering each other as they fought their way back through the shifting corridors. Behind them, the megastructure groaned and creaked, the very fabric of the place unraveling under the strain of its own chaos. It was a desperate, chaotic dash for survival. Ree led the charge, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind focused on the singular task of getting her people out. The walls trembled, sections collapsing with alarming frequency, but somehow they managed to stay ahead of the destruction. It was as if the universe had decided to cut them a break, even if just for a moment. "Almost there," Ree called out, her voice lost in the din of collapsing metal. "Keep moving." They burst into the open space that served as their makeshift command post, the once flickering lights now dark, the terminals eerily silent. Moko was waiting, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "You made it," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Barely," Ree replied, scanning the faces of her team. They were battered, bruised, but alive. The walls continued their death throes, the megastructure collapsing in on itself with a terrible finality. "We've got to get out of here," Ree said, urgency threading her voice. "Moko, can you get us a path?" "I'll try," Moko replied, fingers flying over the controls in a desperate bid to find an exit. It was a race against time, every second precious as the structure around them disintegrated. But somehow, against all odds, they found a way, a narrow path through the chaos leading them away from certain death. They emerged into the harsh, unforgiving light of a distant star, the megastructure crumbling behind them like a dying beast. It was a Pyrrhic victory, but a victory nonetheless. Ree took a deep breath, the taste of survival bitter and sweet on her tongue. They'd made it through against all odds, and now they were free, at least until the universe decided to throw its next cruel joke their way. But that was a problem for another day. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. "All right, folks," Ree said, her voice steady and strong. "Let's get the hell out of here." And together, they turned away from the wreckage of their latest misadventure, ready to face whatever cosmic disaster awaited them next. After all, in a universe that loved nothing more than to test their resilience, the best they could do was keep laughing, and of course, keep shooting. As the universe's latest attempt to snuff out Ree Voss and her crew collapsed behind them like a poorly constructed souffle, they regrouped in what served as their temporary refuge, an asteroid bored out to bare-bones functionality. "Home sweet home," Ree muttered, surveying the cramped quarters. It smelled like burnt circuitry and regret, which made it just cozy enough. Dr. Zephyr Quill was already hunched over a terminal, his brow furrowed in that particular way that suggested he was inventing new curse words under his breath. "Ree, I think I've found something," he announced, finally looking up with the kind of excitement usually reserved for someone who's just found out they're not, in fact, the father. "What is it, Quill?" Ree asked, hoping whatever he'd found wouldn't involve more running, shooting, or imminent death. Though given their track record, That was about as likely as finding a clean public restroom in the galaxy. Quill's fingers danced over the keys with the grace of a slightly caffeinated octopus. The Schalke hive mind, it's fracturing. There are signs of individuality emerging. If we can exploit that, we might turn the tide. Individuality. Jelka scoffed from her corner, weapon always at the ready like she was expecting the walls themselves to sprout legs and start a dance off. You're saying these tin cans are getting personalities. Personalities, disagreements, maybe even Facebook accounts. Quill replied dryly, never looking up. Great, just what the universe needs. More sentient idiots, Jelka remarked. Ree leaned in, glancing at the scrolling data. So what's the plan? Do we send them a motivational speaker? Maybe some free self-help books? Quill shook his head, his expression turning as serious as it ever got. We can trigger the fragmentation, but it's risky. We'd have to get close, hack their systems, and deliver a virus that encourages these traits. It's like suggesting a midlife crisis but with more sparks and explosions. Let me guess, Ree said, folding her arms. The only way to do this is a suicide mission, pretty much, Quill admitted, shrugging with a nonchalance that would fit right in at a funeral for someone nobody liked. Fantastic, Ree sighed. Our options are either suicide or slow, painful obliteration. Which flavor of inevitable death do you guys prefer? Grayson, who had been fiddling with his multi-tool as if he expected it to transform into a magic wand, interjected. It's not like we've got a lot of choices here, Cap. Besides, I prefer a death that's got a chance at leaving a cool story behind. You know, for the history books no one will ever read, Ree couldn't help but chuckle. All right. So we go for a death that'll make a good headline. But seriously, what are the odds of this actually working? Quill hesitated, scratching at his chin as though trying to dislodge an errant thought. About the same as you winning Galactic Bingo on a Tuesday with a hangover. Comforting, Jelka said with a smirk. I love those odds. Wait, Tessa Rune piped up, always ready to throw a wrench or, in her case, a duct-tape device into the chaos. What if, and hear me out, we don't all have to die horribly? Go on, Ree encouraged, intrigued by the prospect of not joining the ranks of space dust just yet. Tessa brandished her homemade device like it was Excalibur, except held together by hope and adhesive. We could use this beauty of mine to amplify the signal from a distance. It might just buy us time to get the hell out before the Schalke can retaliate, so our lives are in the hands of your science fair project. Jelka inquired dryly. Exactly, Tessa grinned. We won't have to be there when it hits the fan. Just close enough to watch the fireworks. Ree mulled it over, her mind weighing the risks like a butcher eyeing a particularly unruly slab of meat. I like it. If it fails, we're dead. But if it works, we're heroes, or infamous, Grayson added, which frankly sounds way more fun. Heroes, infamous either way, we're not just bodies in a scrapyard, Ree concluded. All right, team. Let's get this show on the road before the universe gets bored and decides to kill us with boredom. The plan, such as it was, involved a lot of improvisation, high-stakes gambling, and blind faith in a device held together with a prayer and some very frayed wires. But as everyone knew, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Or as Ree liked to say, nothing exploded, nothing learned. They set off, the ship's engines humming with the nervous energy of a caffeinated squirg. Moko guided them through the asteroid field like she was born to it, navigating the space debris with the precision of a surgeon who decided geometry was their side hustle. All right, folks, Moko's voice crackled over the comms. Next stop, middle of nowhere. Great place for a last stand, Grayson commented, tightening the grip on his trusty multi-tool. You know, if we end up haunting this place, I want first dibs on rattling chains and moaning. Quill chuckled, his eyes still glued to his screens. You'll make a terrible ghost, Grayson. Too much personality. Hey, I'd make ghosting fun, Grayson shot back. I'd be the life of the after-party. The chatter continued as they reached the coordinates, hope mingling with the kind of reckless abandon only born from desperation. The Schalke megastructure loomed, its shifting corridors and unpredictable dangers now a familiar adversary. "Everyone ready?" Ree asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Ready as we'll ever be," Jelka replied, her weapon an extension of her will. Tessa's device was primed, humming ominously. "This thing better work," she said. "I didn't build it to end up with a Darwin Award." With everything in place, they made their move. The ship inched closer, Tessa's device amplifying the signal to the Schalke hive mind. The air was tense, the crew silent as they waited for the first sign of success or failure. "Signals going through," Quill reported, his eyes flickering between screens with the intensity of a gambler watching a roulette wheel. "Good," Ree said. "Let's see if we can't give the Schalke a little identity crisis." The moments stretched, each tick of time a reminder of their precarious situation. Then, like a switch flipping, the Schalke drones began to falter, their movements stuttering and inconsistent. "It's working," Quill announced, disbelief coloring his voice. "The fragmentation is spreading. Time to get clear," Ree ordered, adrenaline surging through her veins. Before they decide to implode, the ship turned, engines roaring to life as they made their escape. Behind them, the Schalke's once perfect coordination frayed, a puppet show with too many strings cut loose. "Let's not stick around for the encore," Jelka advised, watching the chaos unfold with a grin. "I'm allergic to explosions in close proximity." With their path clear, they left the collapsing megastructure behind, the once menacing construct now a monument to the Schalke's unraveling unity. "Think they'll remember us?" Grayson asked, settling back into his seat. "If they do, it's probably as the jerks who ruined their day," Ree replied, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. "Good," Tessa said, packing away her device with the care of a mother hen. "I'd hate to think all this was for nothing." They slipped away, the Schalke no longer the unstoppable force they once were. The galaxy stretched out before them, a tapestry of stars and uncertainty. But for the first time in far too long, Ree felt the stirrings of hope. "All right, folks," she announced, the relief in her voice palpable. "Let's find ourselves a new problem to solve." Their escape was a question left unanswered, a challenge left unmet. But as they sped away from the wreckage of the day's chaos, one thing was clear: whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. And in a universe that loved to test their resilience, that was a victory in itself. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had once again decided to toss Ree and her ragtag crew into the proverbial meat grinder. But this time, they were spitting out shrapnel with a vengeance. The Schalke megastructure loomed ahead, its once intimidating corridors now resembling a haunted house on the brink of collapse. "Everyone ready for another fun-filled day of Try Not to Die?" Ree asked, her voice crackling with the cynicism of 1,000 failed escape plans. "As ready as I'll ever be to be a stain on the universe's underpants," Jelka replied, her weapon practically an extension of her arm at this point. "Remember, folks," Grayson chimed in, twirling his multi-tool like a cowboy with a death wish, "we're not here for long, just a good time." Tessa, the sarcastic medic with more duct tape than sense, adjusted the homemade device, making a noise between a hum and a death rattle. "This bad boy better work or we're all gonna be the punchline in some cosmic joke." Quill was buried in his terminal, eyes darting like a squirt on a sugar high. "The Schalke hive mind's already fragmenting. We give them one more push, and they'll be fighting over their own reflection." The plan was as half-baked as a cake made by a blindfolded chef, but it was theirs. It involved Tessa's device, a signal amplifier, and praying to whatever gods tolerated their shenanigans. The idea was to fracture the Schalke's hive mind further, let their collective consciousness tear itself apart in a glorious display of self-inflicted chaos. "Let's kick this off with a bang," Ree announced, more for morale than anything else. In space, nobody could hear you scream, but they sure could hear a sarcastic pep talk. As they approached the megastructure, the ship's sensors screamed warnings like a toddler denied a candy bar. The Schalke drones were in disarray, their movements now a jittery ballet of dissonance. They'd gone from terrifying to tragically comical, like watching a horror movie monster slip on a banana peel. Looks like they're already arguing over who gets control of the remote, Jelka observed, peering at the data stream. Let's make sure this soap opera gets renewed for another season. Ree nodded, gripping the console until her knuckles turned white. Quill, how's it looking? Signal's good. Amplifiers warming up, he replied, fingers dancing over the keys like they were auditioning for a particularly aggressive piano recital. All right, Tessa, Ree said, light it up. Tessa hit the switch and the device came alive, buzzing like a nest of angry bees pumped full of caffeine. The ship vibrated with the effort, a testament to human ingenuity, or insanity, take your pick. Amplifying now, Tessa confirmed, her voice struggling to rise above the device's angry hum. Everyone hold on to something, or someone, preferably someone attractive, Grayson quipped, earning a smirk from Jelka. The signal shot out, a digital Trojan horse designed to whisper sweet chaos into the Shalka's collective ear. The megastructure trembled, its corridors shifting like a Rubik's Cube in the hands of a particularly frustrated gamer. Shalka are losing cohesion, Quill reported, his excitement barely restrained. It's working. They're starting to fight amongst themselves. Good, Ree said, her grin feral. Let's keep them busy while we make our exit. As the Shalka turned their collective ire inward, the megastructure began to stabilize. What had once been a monolithic bastion of alien precision now quaked with the uncertainty of a teenager on their first date. Time to skedaddle, Grayson suggested, eyeing the flickering lights with suspicion. I'd rather not be around when those things decide to stop bickering and start shooting, agreed, Ree said. Moko, hit it. Moko's voice crackled over the comms, calm and composed. Already on it, Captain. Plotting a course to the nearest star system, preferably one with breathable air and non-hostile locals, boring, Jelka chimed in. But I guess we've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Speak for yourself, Grayson said, his multi-tool spinning in his hand. I thrive on this kind of chaos. Keeps the blood pumping. The ship's engines roared to life, a sound that Ree found strangely comforting. It meant they were still alive, still fighting, and that the universe hadn't yet written them off as collateral damage. As they pulled away, the Shalka's once intimidating presence now seemed almost pitiable. Drones collided with each other, their movements lacking the fluidity of a single-minded purpose. It was a mess, a beautiful tapestry of dysfunction that Ree couldn't help but admire. Think they'll remember us? Tessa asked, securing her device as the ship shot through the debris field. If they do, it's probably as the idiots who gave them an existential crisis, Ree replied, leaning back in her seat with a sigh. I'm okay with that. Better than being forgotten, Grayson added, or remembered as a cautionary tale. As they breached the edge of the asteroid field, the stars stretched out before them once more, a familiar canvas of chaos and opportunity. The Shalka might have been down, but the galaxy was still full of surprises, most of them unpleasant. All right, folks, Ree said, let's find ourselves a new disaster to dive into. Just once I'd like a vacation, Jelka mused, somewhere with beaches and booze. No killer robots or homicidal alien constructs. Dream on, Tessa replied, rolling her eyes. If the universe wants us dead, it's gonna have to try harder. With the Shalka in disarray, Ree pondered the possibilities. They'd managed to destabilize the hive mind, yes, but the repercussions were still unknown. Had they just paved the way for something worse? Time would tell, and time, as always, was a fickle mistress. Think we'll ever catch a break? Grayson asked, his tone almost wistful. Ree shrugged, the weight of command settling on her shoulders like an old, unwelcome friend. Maybe. But until then, we'll keep doing what we do best, running headfirst into danger. Quill suggested, his sarcasm as dry as the asteroid dust they'd left behind. Exactly, Ree said, her smile returning. Full speed ahead and damn the torpedoes. As they sped through the void, the crew settled into their roles, each a cog in the chaotic machine they called home. The universe might have been a hostile, unforgiving place, but they had each other, and that was enough. For now. The ship hurtled onward, a lone speck in the cosmic sea, its crew united by desperation and dark humor. They were a family, bound not by blood but by their shared defiance of a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction. Together they'd face whatever came next, whether it be killers, constructs, or cosmic conundrums. Even in the depths of space, where hope was a dwindling resource, Ree knew one thing for certain. They were the masters of their own fate, and they would write their story in the stars. No matter how messy it got. And in a universe that thrived on chaos and calamity, that was the greatest victory of all. The ship shot through the void, leaving the Shalka's crumbling megastructure in their rear view. It wasn't exactly a graceful retreat, more like a hasty exit from a botched robbery. Ree and her crew had a knack for turning near-death experiences into a fine art. Anyone else feel like we just kicked a hornet's nest and ran? Ree asked, settling back into her seat with the ease of someone who'd just avoided getting splattered. More like we lobbed a grenade and hoped for fireworks, Jelka replied, still clutching her weapon like it was a lifeline in a sea of lunacy. Grayson chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding in a tin can. It's not every day you get to rewrite the personality of an alien race. Should we add galactic therapists to our resumes? Only if we want to get laughed out of every bar in the galaxy, Tessa quipped, strapping down her homemade device with the tenderness one typically reserved for ticking time bombs. Quill's face was still glued to his terminal, the glow highlighting his features like some unholy deity bathed in LED light. Shalka's hive mind is splintering beautifully. We might have given them an identity crisis. Maybe even a few, good for them. Ree's grin was wicked, relishing the irony of human interference sparking individuality in an alien hive mind. Maybe they'll spend less time plotting our demise and more time figuring themselves out. Yeah, and maybe pigs will fly, Jelka muttered, casting a wary glance at the starry expanse outside. But hey, a girl can dream. As the ship's engines hummed a comforting tune, the crew settled into a rare moment of quiet. Silence wasn't exactly golden in their line of work, more like the calm before the next inevitable storm, but for now, it felt good. A flicker of light on the comms panel brought Moko's voice back into the mix. Course plotted to the nearest star system with breathable air. I can't promise it'll be paradise, but it's a start. Breathable air is paradise enough after today, Ree said. Even if it smells like a wet dog. Tessa smirked. I'll take wet dog over no air any day. Grayson leaned back, spinning his multi-tool in a way that suggested he'd be just as adept in a Wild West duel. What do you reckon the Shalka are doing now? Having a group therapy session, Quill snorted, finally prying himself from the terminal. If they're smart, they're sitting in a circle, singing Kumbaya and rethinking their life choices. Jelka let out a laugh, short and sharp. Or arguing over whose turn it is to do the dishes. The ship vibrated as they pushed further from the chaos they'd left behind, the tension easing with every mile of space they put between themselves and the Shalka. Ree leaned back, allowing herself a moment of reflection, not an indulgence she often afforded herself. Crazy to think we might have just changed the course of an entire species, Ree said, more to herself than anyone else. Crazy's our middle name, Tessa replied, shrugging. And besides, who says it's a bad thing? Maybe they needed a little human intervention to shake things up, or we just set them on a path to become even more of a pain in our collective ass, Jelka added, her trademark cynicism firmly intact. Ree chuckled. Every silver lining's got its cloud. Moko's voice crackled back to life, punctuating the moment with unintentional gravity. Entering the new system in 5. Prepare for atmospheric entry. Here's hoping this rock comes with fewer homicidal surprises, Grayson said, casting a wary eye over the console. Quill shrugged, his usual skepticism surfacing. If it doesn't, at least we know the drill. Run, hide, and sarcastically commentate until we find a solution. The ship rattled as they hit the atmosphere, the familiar sensation of controlled chaos enveloping them. It was like coming home, if home was a rickety spacecraft hurtling into the unknown. As they breached the clouds of their new temporary haven, the view screens lit up with a panorama of alien terrain, lush, verdant, and mercifully devoid of immediate threats. It wasn't exactly Eden, but it sure beat the cold, lifeless expanse they'd left behind. "Look at that," Tessa said, a rare note of awe in her voice. "Actual trees." "Haven't seen those in a while. Don't get too attached," Ree warned. "Knowing our luck, those trees probably turn into monsters at night." Jelka snorted, "My money's on killer pollen." As they touched down, the ship settling into the soft embrace of alien soil, Ree felt a momentary sense of peace. A fleeting sensation, but one to be savored. They'd survived against the odds, once again thumbing their noses at a universe intent on their destruction. "All right, folks," Ree said, unbuckling her harness. "Let's see what this place has to offer. But stay sharp. I don't trust anything that's not actively trying to kill me." "You're a regular optimist, Captain," Grayson said, shaking his head with feigned disbelief. "Years of experience," Ree replied, a wry grin splitting her face. The crew disembarked, the alien world greeting them with an unexpected warmth. The air was sweet with the scent of unknown flora, a gentle breeze ruffling their hair like an affectionate ghost. It was almost idyllic if you ignored the fact that they were still very much on the run. As they ventured into the trees, the ground beneath their feet more forgiving than the harsh metal of the ship or the jagged terrain of asteroids, Ree allowed herself to hope. Maybe this place was the reprieve they needed, a chance to regroup and recover before the universe threw its next punch. "Think the Shalka will find us here?" Quill asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "Probably," Jelka said. "But I prefer to live in blissful ignorance until they do." "Good plan," Tessa agreed. "Makes the surprise attacks more exciting." As they walked, reconsidered what their actions had set in motion. The Shalka had been a monolithic force, unified in purpose and relentless in pursuit. Now they were a fractured collective, struggling with newfound individuality and all the chaos it entailed. "They might just surprise us, you know," Ree mused aloud. "Find their own path, maybe even learn a thing or two from us, like how to bicker and backstab," Grayson suggested. "Or how to improvise when everything goes to hell," Tessa added. Ree chuckled, a genuine sound in the stillness of the alien forest. "If nothing else, maybe they'll learn not to underestimate a bunch of stubborn humans." "Here's hoping," Jelka said, her voice tinged with the ever-present sarcasm. As the crew settled into their new surroundings, a sense of camaraderie enveloped them. They were survivors, a ragtag band of misfits brought together by fate and bound by their shared defiance of the cosmos. In a universe that thrived on chaos and calamity, they'd found their place, not as pawns but as players in the grand, unpredictable game. And as they stood beneath the alien canopy, the stars beginning to twinkle in the encroaching dusk, Ree knew one thing for certain: they were ready for whatever came next. Whether it be killer constructs, cosmic conundrums, or the next great adventure, they'd face it head-on with sarcastic quips and a healthy dose of gallows humor. "All right," Ree said, turning to face her crew. "New planet, new start. Let's see what kind of trouble we can stir up." Grayson chuckled. "I'm sure we'll find something." "We always do," Jelka agreed, a smirk playing at her lips. And with that, they ventured further into the unknown, together. A family forged in the fires of cosmic mischief, ready to write their story among the stars.